My name is Hedy Weiss. I was theater, dance, and music critic for the Chicago Sun-Times from 1984 till 2018 almost. And then right now I am the critic for WTTW TV and Chicago Tonight.
I'm always been really curious. What led you to dancing?
Well, it's interesting. I was a dancer. I grew up in New York. I was a dancer for the first half of my life. And as everyone knows, you don't get paid very well as a dancer. And when I moved to Chicago, I taught dance and movement for actors at the DePaul Theater School for several years. But all the time that I was a dancer, I paid the rent by writing. And it sort of was a natural transition, and I was in the right place at the right time, and I started writing for the Chicago Sun-Times.
Tell me a little bit about your training.
Yeah.
Your teachers, what style?
Well, I started very young at the Metropolitan Opera Ballet School, which no longer exists, but there were some great teachers, including Anthony Tudor there. And it was an amazing experience, and I was in several operas, and when the Royal Ballet came to New York very early on, I was an extra in that, and I met incredible people, including Margot Fontaine and Annette de Valois, and I was totally hooked, and I did a lot of dancing throughout school, and then afterwards did a lot of teaching of dance, and also worked with many modern companies, including the Isadora Duncan Revival Company, and at the Theater of Riverside Church, and all kinds of things. The usual freelance dancer life, and then I just decided it was time to do a switch. I never took a writing class in my entire life. I just wrote, and I think growing up in the dance world, being totally immersed in it, studying at the Joffrey, studying with some of the great Russian teachers, it was just in my blood. It's an interesting thing. I think, as with all criticism, for me the idea is you're watching a live performance, and what you really want to do is suggest what it was like to watch that. And then, of course, you do make judgments whether it's worth seeing or not seeing, what's interesting, what's not interesting, following the dancers. But to me, it's really capturing that incredible live moment or live 2 hours on stage. It's very tricky, and it's different from theater, where more often than not you have a narrative, and although in ballet certainly you have a narrative, and in classical music, which is even more abstract, so it's kind of a happy medium. And I think the more you watch it, the more you understand all of the components that are involved in it. And what I also want to do is make it accessible to people. And so I stayed away from a lot of technical terms and tried to evoke the emotion and the plasticity of bodies and the music and the theatricality of it.
So what year did you arrive in Chicago?
In 1980.
And what was the dance scene like then? And I think you probably had the best seat in the house, watching it evolve.
Right. It's really interesting. When I got here, I thought, oh my God, it's a dance desert. And it wasn't entirely. There was the Ruth Page Heritage, so there was, there were classes, obviously. And there was Hubbard Street Dance Chicago, which, was under Lou Conte at that point. And the Goodman Theater had the dreaded Philip Morris dance series. So there was that, but it compared to New York, where you would just kill to go to any single performance on any night, it was a little sad. It's been kind of an amazing thing. I watched the development of the theater world, and dance came a little bit later, and I think one of there were two major things. One was the transition that Lou Conte did brilliantly to a more contemporary and a more artistic kind of rep for Hubbard Street. And at the same time, there were more international tours coming through at the Auditorium Theater. And then there was the MCA, which began to do some performance. And there was Columbia College's Dance Center, which brought some companies. And then there was the arrival of the Joffrey. And I think that totally changed the landscape. Not immediately, but it really, over several years, started to change the landscape because it was a major undertaking. And eventually there was a school, not in the beginning. And then they got a home in the Loop, which was an incredible. And I think it became, in very short time, looking at how the arts developed, it became sort of the cornerstone of dance here, not just because it was ballet, but because it raised the level on so many levels, technically and just in terms of identity. It just changed the scene. Don't get me started. Dance has always been the orphan child of the arts. There was, an established opera company here, and then there was the huge explosion of theater here, and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and a lot of other incredible music. But dance has always been the orphan, and I would hit my head against the wall many, many times trying to get coverage. And the truth is, I think it was thought of as elitist, which is exactly the opposite, because almost everybody dances in one way or another. And it was actually very, I think that also, the audience also has changed. And because of the permanent nature of the Joffrey, and because of companies like the Ensemble Espagnol and Chicago Human Rhythm Project and Chicago Dance Crash, and of course Hubbard Street, and then all the visiting companies, there is an audience. And then there was the Chicago Dancing Festival right here in Millenium Park for 10 years. I'm really sorry it's gone, because anybody who believes that there is not an audience should have been there for when 15 or 20,000 people came. Of course, it was free, and that makes a big difference. I think it's pretty much the same. I do have more space with the WTTW website because, you're not boxed into your little thing. And I have a wonderful editor, and she really understands how to use photographs. But it's a different world now. It just is. And also, having videos on the internet changes the whole thing, because it used to be you really had to go to a performance or see a rare thing on TV, and now you can get a taste of everything from a video. Well, the audience is very different for each company, and each company has developed a following. And I would say just maybe go and see if the companies are willing to share their subscription lists and find out, what was the first incentive that brought them to the theater. The audience, I think, it's a very hip audience. If you look at just fashion, from the theater audience to the classical music audience to the dance audience, you see something quite different, and it's a lot of fun. But there's a huge crossover. I just wish that, when Yo-Yo Ma played his cello in the park this summer, it was free, and they had to close the park. There were so many people who wanted to come see it. And I just wish that really, again, top-level dance, as was in the Chicago Dancing Festival, could come back here, at least every summer, and And I think 3 performances, that, the underwriting of 3 performances is absolutely essential. And of course, the earlier you start, the better it is. I would love to see that. Well, there is one thing that I did forget to mention, and that was that the whole dance explosion also made a huge difference in the dance in musical theater. That I've noticed an incredible sophistication and growth and improvement in the dancers, and also in the choreographers. I think it's really noticeable.